Chapter 4 on the philosophy of education is very interesting, much different than what we've studied. Really has some extreme positions and stuff, and you'll see I'm bantering and complaining and chattering about a number of them, and I'm just trying to get you to think also. Hang on to this as you go through this, that eventually I'm going to ask you what your philosophy is. And so you want to be grabbing that stuff as you go through here now and coming up with some ideas, so it's not such a new idea when that comes around here. I had some fun with this, some really different things, and you'll see some of the things we do today come from these foundations. Then at the end we get into the Eastern way of thinking, China and Japanese and India, as well as the Native Americans and some of their philosophies. And you're going to do a lot more in this than you've done in the past. You're going to contribute more to this, build a body of knowledge. And the harder you work at this, the assessment will be better because you'll have a nice little cheat sheet for yourself to get ready. So Chapter 4 on philosophy. So let's take a look at this on philosophy. And there's professors all over this world that claim to be experts in philosophy and love this. And what I've always thought about philosophy, it's really soft. And so I'll show you, take you on a little journey of what this is about here. Has a somewhat of an introduction here that should help you, I think, get started. The structure and methodology of philosophy. Structure and methodology. And let me, before I go too far here, let me take you on this. Here's how we're going to approach this, as the topics say here, and you can see it's quite long and in depth, so you're going to have to contribute to this to get a fully understanding of it. And so this is how it's laid out, and you can see it's long, and some of these are quite simple, especially these with thought here, that you're going to have to sort those off for yourself. So let's go back to the textbook. Basic question about human nature, beauty principles, right and wrong, all those things are philosophy. And if you've had any kind of philosophy class, you know some of this. And I didn't study any philosophy until I was in graduate school. Only to find out I had a really hard time getting arms around. So here highlighted, philosophy resides in people's minds, hearts, and is seldom expressed in words or specific ideas. And so you all are somewhat driven by a personal philosophy. You just aren't always able to articulate it. Yet you approach the world through that philosophy that's developed over time from your family and your experiences. All those things come together to form your kind of your personal philosophy. It says perspective of personal philosophy helps us focus on underlying issues and assumptions, belief, and are always evident to us in a hectic pace. So I'll just pop ahead here a little bit. Philosophy can be defined in many ways. It's best thought of as passion to uncover and reflect on the underlying meaning of things derived from the Greek philos. The word philosophy means love of wisdom. And that's your first one here. Means this is number 1. And that is right here on page 77. Love of wisdom goes right here. Okay. Goes on, did not claim to be wise. Early philosophers did not claim to be wise. Rather, they viewed themselves as reflective thinkers in search of wisdom. And that's how it's changed. And now we think they are wise, but early ones said, we're just searching. We're just searching. And down here in the highlight, teachers must constantly confront, you and me, the underlying assumptions that guide conduct, determine values, and ultimately explain that which influences the directions of all existence. So that's a lot. Ugh. Philosophy reminds teachers to continue the search for truth and not be satisfied with pat answers, even answers that are provided by so-called experts. To be a philosopher, an expert is one who professes truth. An excerpt from one or two searches, questions, and reflects. Hence, study philosophy is the heart of education. Okay, and what's interesting about that is philosophy and truth there was a time that science we agreed in truth, but now not even science leads us to truth, because everybody has their own truth in science depending on their previous beliefs. And so there was a time that science was, but you think of how much science has changed, things that we took to be factual that changed. Oh, you want to know like what? I'll give you one. Pluto. When you and I were in school, Pluto was one of the universes, out there, in the galaxy, and now we find out it's just a constellation of stars. It really isn't a planet at all. Well, that was science. That was proven, and now we're unsure. And there's all kinds of things. Another thing in science. Oh, how about butter? Yeah, butter. Butter good, butter bad. Butter kind of good, kind of bad. Everybody get off of butter. Eat margarine. Ooh, margarine has that partially hydrogenated oils in it. That bad. That'd kill you. Get off. Go back to butter. Oh, butter too fat. And that's all comes out of supposedly science. And my point on all that is truth. Philosophy is about truth, seeking truth. And nowadays, truth always has to do with agenda. And so the branches. Let me flip back here and just give you this. Seeks to understand fundamental principles, must understanding their own assumptions. What drives yours? What assumptions do you make? Provides tools to think clearly, and that's what this is all about, is giving you some tools. All right. So here's the branches. The metaphysics of which is reality. You'll need these. This one, the epistemology is about truth, and axiology is about value. Okay. So started here again. Questions about reality or being, about knowledge and about goodness, and beauty, and living the good life. That's what drives philosophy. So here's metaphysics, and I'm not going to do a lot of this. I'm going to ask you to lift this and carry this. But as you read these three, again, I'll give this to you. Metaphysics, epistemology, and axiology brings you over here. It has to do with ethics and aesthetics. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do in this. I've given you this chart and asking you to fill this in. And this is expandable. You can put in what you need. But what is the purpose of education? And that comes right here, what I circled. That's the purpose of education of each of these. Then how should I treat a student based on these? And this one here, what knowledge is most worth knowing? Okay, who should decide what is worth knowing? What should be included in the curriculum, and what is the role of the teacher in each of these? And pay particular attention to this, because this is on the test. You have to separate these on the test. Those two, the difference between ethics and aesthetics. Okay. If you don't know, put a line or something here that you don't know. You can't figure that one out. But you should be able to come to conclusions if you understand all three of these topics. And this is not a big bad read. It's a pretty short read to do this. These branches of philosophy. And this chart will be your guiding chart here. All right. And this will be number 2. Fill this out. Fill in, yep. All right. Thinking as a philosopher, and this is you now. You be successful in this endeavor. Think like a philosopher. And I'll just give you this too. And philosophy is interesting because there was a professor that DSU when I first came there, that his thing was he taught kids to think. That was his specialty, he said, was to teach the kids to think. But I continued, observed in him, they only were thinking if they thought like him. If they had different thoughts than he did, he corrected them. And he called that teaching them to think. So in other words, if you and I have different philosophies, if you change yours to be like mine, then you're a philosopher, then you're thinking. You're open-minded. Open-minded means you accept my thoughts instead of your own. And so that was interesting. So what is it like to think as a philosopher? Well, with any discipline, philosophy has a style of thinking as well as a set of terms and methodology distinguished from one of the disciplines. The philosophers spend much of their energy developing symbols or terms in their things that are abstract and precise, developing ideas that embrace more instances like abstraction and understanding. Okay, so let's come back over here. The two types of thinking here. Here's this enhance. There's a great variety of ways philosophers think. Hence, it's difficult to set forth a simple set of rules for thinking. Isn't that interesting? Okay. First way to think is analytical thinking. It's labeled analytical. Philosophers employ this style when they attempt to examine questions of what seems to be. A second philosophy style of thinking is called prophetic thinking. This style focuses on what ought to be. So that's over here. Focus on what seems to be and what ought to be. And again, you'll want to distinguish them for the assessment, or better known as the test. Those two things. So analytical ways of thinking in philosophy. Notion of abstraction covers multiple meanings. Involves drawing away the concrete level experience to a conceptual plane of principles and ideas. 3 steps. Abstraction can be thought of in 3 steps. Well, thinking as a philosopher, and there's a bunch of stuff here for you. Again, it provides people the ability, what they need to think clearly. Let's pop back over here on this part of to think clearly is the structure of this. And here's those branches we talked about. So what are those things? The analytical thinking and prophetic thinking. And that's where we're going to start here on this. First is the analytical thinking, and 2 different thinking styles. Philosophies, they wrestle large and structured questions. The first is labeled analytical thinking. Employ this style when they attempt to examine questions of what seems to be. Okay, so you want that there. What seems to be, you bring that right here. What seems to be. This is, where are we at? This is number 3. And what is abstraction? Comes down here. Abstraction is this, because of multiple meaning. The abstract is this. That involves drawing away from the concrete level experience to a conceptual plane. And again, that's back here from abstractions. You want that definition. This is number 4. And with that, there are these 3 steps involved in that. And so that's number 5. 3 steps from your textbook on page 79. Okay, go do that. And here there's a good concept here of how it becomes that. This abstraction process of abstraction helps teachers pull away from the bells and whistles, examine this textbook, because the theory about textbooks. So then down here, imagination and generalization goes with this analytical thinking. This guy, Herbert Alexander, took a second step. Imagine can be thought as an altering of abstractions. So that's what imagination is. This is number 6. That definition. And number 7 is generalization down here. Sets ranges. And that's number 7. And then what does it have to do with? Logic, deductive thinking, and inductive thinking. And again, I'm giving you this to pull out of here, but you need to read this whole passage to get some grip on it. And all these terms will be on the test. You'll have to have a working knowledge of all these different terms. Okay, and so you get logic as, and all 3 of these as number 8. A definition that you pull right from the book here. Don't go off some other place and find it. This is interesting here, the analytical ways to focus on a problem. And I'm going to try and clip this and put it on the clip page for you to download and insert in your notes after this. I'm going to give that a try, but first I just want to go through this. And it says, why do some students in my classroom fail to complete their homework? So here is the analytical way of thinking of this. First, the abstraction. You draw away from the specifics. What motivates my students? What inhibits my students from completing their work at home? And what motivates human beings? Those are abstract questions. And then you move to this imagination and generalization stage. What are the possibilities? Well, people like their freedom. They don't want to be bound down with homework or extra work. And people enjoy completing tasks that they do well. And if they don't do it well, they don't want to do it. So here's the logic from that. I need to allow more choices for students. And I need to examine the home context of students who repeatedly fail to get their homework. That is the analytical process of thinking about this problem of failed complete homework. Okay, I'm going to try and clip this and put it on the clip page. And here it is under the Chapter 4 clips. Under the Chapter 4 clips right here. You come here and, as you know, you download it, right mouse it, save the image as, and then you upload it into your notes like this. Right here, this will be number 9, as that will appear right here in your notes. Okay, by importing it. Or inserting it, I should say, in it. And then mark number 9 next to it. And that's each of these. You're turning them red. You're marking them clearly so I can find them. All right, let's go back to the textbook and look at deductive. Let me speed this up where it belongs. Okay. So how about the prophetic ways? We have the analytical ways, now the prophetic ways of philosophy. So first, prophetic seeks to uncover multiple, even divergent realities. That's this one right here. You define it. So this would be our number 10. Is with these. You have to bring these in. What do each of these mean? This is number 11. And they come from right here. Prophetic thinking. First of all, you have to have discernment. Capacity to develop a vision of what should be. And then connection. Must connect with others. This is really a touchy-feely one. Then tracking hypocrisy. What is this right here? What is this gap between principles and practice? And then it takes you to hope. They're claiming this is the most important one, hope. Okay, and that's where the world is unfinished. It's get rid of your skeletons, things that you're stuck on. So those are those 4 there. And then I'm going to ask that I'm going to put this for you, number 12. You will insert this one back here on this thing. And let me just take you through this. Okay, and this is entirely different now. This is prophetic ways of thinking. Prophetic. We had analytical. Here's prophetic way. If we want to uncover these multiple realities, why do some students in my classroom fail to complete their homework? So that's a problem. So discernment. Develop a vision of what should be. Children and adults should be free to develop a variety of ways according to individual needs. So what is that connection? Well, you relate and show empathy to others. I have felt constrained by school assignments and rigid academic requirements. So what is that gap between principles and practice? Why do I require homework? Do I allow for student choice? In the hope you give, I'll examine our school's philosophy and mission and discuss the implication of our children with my fellow teachers. And what's so interesting about this topic, much discussion, much written now about the value of homework. And you have homework stories, and I have homework stories. A long, long tradition of school is homework, but it's now being reconsidered in a lot of circles. Is it how necessary? What's the value of it? And those type of things. So it's very interesting. But this is just a comparison of these 2 approaches: an analytical thinking and prophetic way of thinking. Okay, I'm going to clip this and put this also on the clip page for you to bring in number 12. Do that now. So technology and philosophy. Did you know those two went together? Technology and philosophy has a couple things here that I want to point out. First of all, there's Martin Heidegger in 1993. Not too often in these books you get to see something so recent. Well, it's recent to me. That's not so recent to you. He believed technology provided the greatest danger, yet the greatest possibility for humankind. And you've heard that before, and I know that in my own life, that it's the greatest tool and the greatest danger. He was concerned because the power of present information by emphasizing the worth, de-emphasizing its dangers, called the power of technology and framing. And he was concerned with humans' ability to present this. If you allow me to read this paragraph, it's very interesting, and maybe that's where we'll take this. With the release of new technology increasing exponentially, other philosophers struggle to determine whether any one technology enhances or detracts from the essence of life and the natural order. Some philosophers contend that technology is developing so quickly that mankind can no longer control its direction. They contend that technology now has the power to develop autonomously because humans have become so dependent on it. I agree. Dewey thought it was natural. Change is natural, so that the technology is natural. And here's a big one that probably hits it the best. No matter what you think, it's here to stay. And hopefully, using this analytical and prophetic tools philosophy, you can navigate your way through the technology and its influence. So here's what I want you to do with that. You just simply respond to these two. This is number 13. These two both. Number 13. Respond to those two things. So what about this? A teacher as philosopher. Do you constantly think about the bigger picture? You know, that you're a constant philosopher as a teacher, and what they're contending here that I absolutely agree with, that every time you walk in your classroom, you're displaying your philosophy, whether you're conscious of it or it's a subconscious thing. And here's how, the highlighted part, they answer these questions by the way they set up their classroom, by the way they teach students, and by the rules they impose, and by the relate to the others. No teacher can escape the role of philosopher because they live out their personal philosophies every time they enter their classroom. So at the bottom here, clearly reflective teacher is a natural philosopher. So philosophies are acted out by the way they set up their classrooms, teach their students, and the rules they impose in this. They live there out every time they enter the classroom. So in essence, where we're going now is to walk you through schools of philosophy that are subconsciously you act out on that you're not aware. So we bring them to the forefront, make you aware of these different philosophies, and maybe give you a chance to reflect a little bit deeper on how you'll act, how you'll do some of the things you'll do as a teacher based on these. So let's get into the real philosophy here, and that's the schools of philosophy, the schools of thought that go along with philosophy. And these authors have narrowed it down to about 4. And if you were to Google educational philosophies or school of philosophies, you'd find many, many more. But they're going to go with these 4, so we'll follow them. And those 4 are idealism, realism, pragmatism, and existentialism. Here, they're highlighted here. Just know that these people are just individual thinkers like you that come up with ideas and put them on paper. And you, too, will form your own philosophies. And I'm guessing it may mimic some of this, but it will maybe more likely be a combination of these things that were known. So these are the 4 well-known ones. And then after this, we'll do the Eastern and the Native American thoughts on this also. So technically, there are 2 clusters of this that are a teacher-centered philosophy and student-centered. So maybe that will help you through this here. So first of all, let me just flip back over here and say here are the 4: idealism, realism, pragmatism, and existentialism. Okay, those are the 4. And they give them here on the screen, and each here is the foundation value behind those. Now, what are you going to do with those? Well, you are going to put these together. I'm giving you this little chart, and this is what you'll look at. What is the purpose of education? Let me flip back and see where we're at. We're on about number 14. This is number 14 here, is to fill this out completely. And this will be a work in progress through the rest of this chapter. You can start and stop as much as you want on this, but at the end, this will be in your notes, this table, and you'll have it completely filled out. What is the purpose of education in each of these thoughts? How should I treat students? Who should decide what is worth knowing? What should be included in the curriculum? And what is the role of the teacher? And then who contributed? And they're very good about telling you who contributed. And there's a line here on the thing. This line will be here for you. It's just not showing up on my PowerPoint here. So first of all, in this left-hand column, I want this. These 4 things here, I want right in here in the column with them. And then start across here. And some of these aren't going to match the textbooks exactly. You're going to have to read and understand in order to fill these in. And if you have no idea, make note of that you don't have an idea. You can insert comments like we did before, something like that. But this will also be your cheat sheet going forward to study for the exam over this. Is all this, because this is what the test will be over, is being able to match up this row with this row on this side. So that's a twofold here. It'll be critical that you use this for your lecture outline, but also a little cheat sheet. So I'm not going to flip back and forth a lot. There's a few other things I'm going to ask you to add beyond this, but this primarily will be your essence of the rest of this study, is filling out this table from this. So I'm going to just skip through the textbook very quickly, and it's all here for you. For example, these. Make sure you try and get each of these plugged in here someplace. And that's, I say, they've done a great job with each of these. Here it tells you who contributed to them. And you have to be able to match up some of this stuff too, because on some of the questions on the test, and now it says, that Plato's with idealism, but what was Plato's contributions? And they're right here. Okay. So a little study, and that's why I'm asking you to bring that in here also, who contributed, because that's going to be part of your study. But idealism, that it's all about ideas. Learning comes from within. Truth growth must be self-initiated. I mean, they're just a very distinct school of thought here. And what do you study? You study great works of others in the past and imitate the great leaders. That all fits together. And this is what the teacher's role is here. And how do you do it? How should it be taught? This way. Okay, that would fill out your chart. And of course, then these folks here. That's idealism. And there's a question on the test, 2 questions on the test, I think, about Socratic dialogue. And the nice thing is we already studied this. And Socratic dialogue deals with questions. They reflect, induce, general principles, discover stuff just when questioning. In other words, problem solving. You solve problems. Okay, and then here's realism. Takes you through the same. Who contributed to realism? And then again, what does it look like in the classroom? Or pragmatism in the classroom. Here's those folks. Okay. Extensionalism. So I'm not going to come back to this too much. I'm just going to give you a few other places. Here's the contributors. All right, and then we'll come to that. So let me go to the textbook, if you will. In idealism, believe in the power, the highlighted parts of reasoning, but de-emphasize both the scientific method and sense perception, which they hold suspect. In other words, if you don't reason it yourself, it's not so. They contend that the rational mind has the ability to reason itself, and that's the underlying thing of why you need to experience everything. Idealists search and value universal and absolute truths. Okay, so this is really interesting. They are about absolute truths. A very interesting concept, because we live in a time where there is no such thing as absolute truth. Things that we held to be true in the past are not always accepted as absolute truth anymore. Okay. Idealists contend that truth, goodness, and beauty transcend, connect all ideas, and hence are important to the cultures of people. Okay, so there's no way for you to get all this without reading what the authors and their perspective on stuff. And remember, you go back to what is these authors' perspectives on this whole approach they take. Okay. So educational implication of idealism, idea-centered rather than subject-centered or child-centered, because the ideal of the idea is the foundation of all things. Ideas are it. And then here it gives you what should we teach and how should we teach, and that'll help you fill in your chart. And that's also giving you a little cheat sheet. And here they tell you some more what these folks here that were involved. And it talks about matching your ideas. And you want to go with this because that's eventually what I'm going to ask you to do, is to come up with your own philosophy based on this chapter and to bring some stuff into it. Okay. Here's Plato's and Socrates, what they brought to it. Here's Kant. Here's Martin. And please read all of that. And here's the Socratic dialogue and what the value of that was. And then we go into realism, and that comes from Aristotle, a school of philosophy that holds that reality, knowledge, and value exist independent of the human mind. In other words, the realists reject the idealist notion that the ideas are ultimately reality. So this is the other thing that's not explained real well, but this is really the essence of this is one philosophy is in response to another. You disagree, so you come up with an alternating. You come up with what would you call a counter philosophy. Okay. Every piece of the physical world is composed of matter. Matter takes on many forms and structures. The reason things look so different from one another is due to the form and structures of matter. That's metaphysics. What is the real? Do you remember from that earlier study? Realists endorse the use of senses and scientific investigation, reason. Okay, contrary to idealism. And this is how you find truth. Knowing involves sensation and abstraction, and we've studied those earlier. And here is, I have this on your clip for you. You'll bring this in right after idealism and contribute it right here. Let's see. Let me back up a little bit. Idealism. Here's realism. Okay, and right after here, this will be number 15 at the bottom here. Number 15 will be 4.3 from the clips bin. And the clips bin, clips page here. This is where you'll download this. You already have these. You already have these two in. Now you have this one, and eventually you'll bring in 4.4. And then this will be your last one you'll bring in. Okay. So that's where you put that. Here again, you have educational implications of realism. What should we teach? How should we teach? And again, matching your ideas to this. Here, and who's involved. Locke, we've already studied. And the last one. And this, you know, this tabula rasa of Locke, that was his philosophy in this one. Whitehead. Okay, and then pragmatism. What is pragmatism? Pragmatism roots come from the thinking of a number of 19th century philosophers. Pragmatism is a process philosophy that stresses evolving and changing rather than being. Now, this is, stay with me on this. This is tricky. It differs from most forms of idealism or realism by a belief in an open universe that is dynamic, meaning evolving, instead of becoming. There are no unchanging ideas and no universal laws. Nothing is absolute. Pragmatists are nothing is absolute. Nothing is for sure. Because the underlying principle that explains the universe is change, many pragmatists claim that the metaphysical foundation for their thinking is unverifiable, meaning I can never be trapped on my beliefs because my beliefs are always changing. Truth is always changing, so no matter what you think you know, it may or may not be so based on the future. And because change is so important, pragmatists place a great deal of emphasis on the importance of understanding what it means to know. To the pragmatist, knowing is a transition because nothing is absolute. Or conversion between learner and environment. The transaction or conversation between learner and environment alters that changes both learner and the world. So like the realists, pragmatists believe we learn best through experience, doing things. But pragmatists believe that experience changes both the knower and the world. Whereas realists, concerned with passing organized body of knowledge from one generation to the next, pragmatists do not believe in that at all. They believe in using ideas as an instrument for problem solving. So again, webbed as they are to change and adaptation, pragmatists do not believe in absolute and unchanging truth or values. Because we believe in a constantly changing universe, values change too. Okay, what contributes to personal and social growth is underlying principle. We can clarify values of this. President Obama, in his campaign in 2008, declared over and over, "I am a pragmatist." I believe in pragmatism, meaning he does not believe in absolute truth. That my values and ideas and things I know to be true are always changing. Okay. So what are the implications of that for pragmatists? Well, if you have the changing nature of your teaching as nothing is absolute, are you going to be studying absolute things? Prefer a curriculum that draws the disciplines together to solve problems, kind of an interdisciplinary approach to theirs. That truth that's found in the real world is always changing. So it's critical to present concepts as relate to contemporary problems, not to absolute truths. Okay, so what should we teach? How should we teach? All come into play, and here's their matching ideas again. And then here's your folks that have to do with pragmatism. And you'll want to have a good working knowledge of them and what they do, what their contributions were. Then the last of these, existentialism. Existence precedes essence. Contends the reality is nothing more than lived existence, and the final reality resides within each individual. So this is a whole nother ballgame. There's no absolute, not even change. There is no ultimate principle or meaning. Yeah, a little hard to get your arms around this, but just go with this. Read this, and I think it'll come a little clearer in how distinctly different these four are. Existentialists believe that we live in an alien, meaningless existence on a small planet in an unimportant galaxy universe. I'm going to guess if you're an existentialist, you're not a person of faith, because they're rejecting all of that here. Each individual is the creator of his or her own essence. So a person of faith would never have this kind of a belief. But I don't know. You create your own meaning. Each individual is a creator of his or her own meaning. Some people might be paralyzed with this view. Existentialists are energized by their quest to clarify their reality. Okay. So what are the implications for that? I believe that most schools, like corporate symbols, de-emphasize the individual and relationships between the teacher and the student. Existentialists claim that when educators attempt to predict the behavior of students, they turn individuals into objects to be measured, quantified, and processed. Existentialists tend to feel that tracking, measurement, and standardization militate against the creation of opportunities, self-directions. And if you read that again, it's hard to make an argument against that. That if we simply track, and I think of my kids going to a school of 2,400 kids, that it's all about tracking, measuring, standardizing, organizing, clarifying. And here's a big one, what we do with these 2,400 kids, rank them based on those things. And so we no longer, we have teachers that are seeing a couple hundred students a day, no longer know people, they know numbers and behaviors. I often think they look out the desk as teachers, sometimes have to look over the desk and see a bunch of behaviors instead of a bunch of people, a bunch of kids. And that would be something that the extensionists believe also. So what should we teach if you're an extensionalist? To process developing a free, self-actualizing person, a product that's centered on the feelings of the students. Yes, you heard that right. Feelings, nothing more than feelings. Yeah. Okay, and I'm not poo-pooing this. I'm just saying it's a completely different, probably contrary approach than what you're used to. Therefore, proper education does not start with the nature of the world with humankind, but with human, individual, or self. Me, 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 me. There. At school, students should be encouraged to discuss their lives, choices they're making, because we all live in the same meaningless predicament. It's a little hard for me to say, and again, I don't want to poo-poo this. I'm just saying it's very contrary to how we're doing things. And then how should we teach? Engaged in projects, treat students with free personalities. All right, and then again, matching from this is your own. And here's the folks behind that, and they have interesting beginnings. You want to read a little bit of them. Interesting beginnings here. So what is this dynamic relationship of philosophy and education? Well, just knowing that your philosophy or a school's philosophy here in this last sentence is the way curriculum is organized, the manner in which it's delivered, instruction is delivered, all comes into play with this. And I'm going to talk about this in a second down here. And the character of the school environments, the process used in testing, grading. Now, if all you know, you come back to this here chart here. If you look at this, how could it not? If you look at the philosophies, how could it not be effective? Have impact? School environments, testing, grading, things like that. The environment and the way we do everything has to be related to how we see these things, these philosophies. Okay, and there's a table in here that'll help you some. Table 4.1. And this will give you some. And again, this is in the clips, and I'm going to ask you to bring that in, and I'm going to have you bring that at the end here. Right here, pragmatists, and then extensionalists. And I'm going to have you bring it right here, and this is going to be number 15. Is you're going to bring in that 4-4 from the clips. Because, again, I want you to have it in your notes is why I'm having you do this. You'll download it and insert it in here and mark it clearly. Mark it in your notes that that's what it is. And also I'm going to add this to you in the discussion page. What is right, or who is right? Should teachers wear business attire at school? And you'll look at this, and I know where most of you will land on this, but let me just say this, and not to influence you too much, but to make you think more before you go to the discussion page, is much has been written about some of the demise of behavior in schools related to not only how teachers dress, but how they conduct themselves. And again, an evolution of the schools and teachers over the years from very professionally dressed people continuously to much, much, much more casual today. So bring that with you as you read these two things. How should we dress? And does that have anything to do with it? And that's what I'm going to ask you here back on the wiki and the discussion. That same thing I'm going to say. And ask you to go a little deeper here. I'm going to call it teacher dress code, and I'm just going to. You have to read this. And in that, I want you to talk about why your thoughts are one way or the other, and more specifically, please mention this: what are the implications of your dress, if any, in schools? Okay, and I'm going to put this down here for you, like we have. You insert a widget, and it's a discussion area, and there it's down there for you. Okay. And I'm going to bring that over here so remember, again, let's make that right here also, and we'll call this number 16, discuss. Okay, 15 and 16 are both right there. All right. So let's go on. And this now is a little outside of what you know or a way of thinking, the Eastern and Native American, North American ways of knowing. Okay, if you allow me again just to say this, what they do, what these authors do now, we're going to tell you why this is part of that study. Because we normally don't study this at all. We're always concerned about the Western way of doing things. So most studies of Western philosophy typically begin with Greek philosophers. Yet there is evidence that Platonic philosophy owed much of its development to Eastern thinkers who emphasized the illusionary quality of the physical world. In addition, native peoples from many lands have developed a way of thinking about life and education that extends and reorganizes the writing of Western thinkers. To ignore such ways of knowing would violate the very nature of philosophy, which, as noted at the beginning of the chapter, is in search of truth. Remember, philosophy is searching for truth. And again, well, I won't give you that till we move on here. Page 94, Eastern. Eastern ways of knowing. Okay, again, normally not a study. Although there are differences among the writings of the Far Eastern and Near Eastern philosophies, Eastern ways of knowing as a group stress inner peace, tranquility, attitudinal development, and mysticism. In general, Eastern ways of knowing emphasize order, regularity, patience, and are both proportional and in harmony with the laws of nature. Again, that's very contrary to the Western way of thinking, to the Western way of teaching kids. Right here, Western philosophy tends to emphasize logic and materialism. Eastern ways of knowing, on the other hand, stress the inner rather than the outer world, intuition rather than sense, mysticism rather than scientific discoveries. Western philosophers tend to begin with the outer material world, an abstract and concept and underlying. Eastern ways of knowing begin with the inner world and reach outer world phenomena. Okay, and so again, you don't know this. We don't study this. It's not part of learning, and it's very interesting how they bring this in. And one thing you're going to find, it's very contrary to the Western way of life because it de-emphasizes the spiritual realm of a God. It's all again about. I mean, there's some of that, but some of that God study is based on false gods, on the rain god and the sun god and all the different gods. So it's interesting. It's no wonder that it was left behind when the educational philosophy were being founded and developed in this country. Strong bent towards the spiritual side of nature. Okay, again, because the Eastern ways of knowing have such early beginnings and maintain a strong bent, interesting word, strong bent toward the spiritual side of nature. Their stories maintain a language of gods and goddesses, much like Greek mythology. Unlike the Greeks who tried to separate philosophy from religion, Eastern thinkers intertwined religious doctrines with philosophical views about the nature of worlds and humans. And again, you can see why that didn't play well in this country in the foundations and formations of our schools. This one good reason to study Eastern ways of knowing is they offer vantage points from which the Western thought. Okay, and down here highlighted, consider the implication of Eastern ways of knowing have a for curriculum in the perspectives of diversity feature. Okay, and that's here. And that's a big, and that's, I say, this whole study is going to stretch you a little bit. Now, Indian thought, and now that's not Indians, that's if for people from India are known as Indians, have a order of thought here, and it comes back to here. First, this is just the Eastern way. Inner peace, tranquility, mysticism rather than scientific. It's a mystery, mysticism. Order, regularity, patience, harmony, and laws of nature. Again, contrary to the way we would approach things from the Western world. inner world value over outer world, religious and philosophical views intertwined. Okay. So here is India, comfort with opposites, knowledge used to improve social and communal life, people responsible for who they are, who they become. And here's what I'm going to have you do. I'm going to have you fill this out also, just like we did before, of each of these thoughts. India, Chinese, Japanese, and then this educational implications of it. But what is the purpose of education? How should I treat the students? And again, some of this is going to be a little bit of a stretch, but that's okay. You see if you can decipher from what's written between the textbook here and the support that's given here. And I'm going to stop a second. So Indian thoughts here. And between this and what's in the textbook, you'll come up with those, each of those. The Indian thought, here's the Chinese thought, and you'll want to read this. And who's behind them? This is who contributed is in there for the most part. Down to what are the implications of this Eastern way of knowing. And you may not be able to find this one on who's behind this, but it gives you that that part of it. And then this on Native Americans is interesting also, how this comes into here and what role it will have. There's Chinese, Japanese, and then the implications. And again, here's some stuff for you. And here's Native Americans is on relationship of humans to nature. And for a long time in the Western way, we thought that was a little hokey, but now will be readily accepted beliefs. And nothing here is new to you if you've studied Native Americans at all. Traditional stories, information is passed on by these stories, and those are beliefs are only passed on verbally. And this is interesting too, is that humans revere nature, belief of supreme being, and whoever that is. Shaman, Holy One, interprets our old ways of knowing. And here's the different tribes and their beliefs. And again, here's another one of these that you'll fill out. And again, these might be a little tough. If you can't find them, you can't find them. You can't come up with it. But just a look at all those. And here's those implications of American knowing that will help you with those. Okay. Here's Navajo, Lakota, Hopis. And here's the implications in Northern American ways of knowing. And then here, matching ideas from Eastern and Northern American ways of knowing what is important. If you'll allow me, the ideas of Eastern and Native American ways of knowing share a number of similarities. They both show a reverence for the world in which we live and a value the importance of harmony with nature and each other. However, there are many different nuances in this theme based on the geographical locations of writers like India, China, and Japan, as well as the tribes which describe this. So take a moment to consider those ideas for here. Okay, and then here is your thing here. So let me back up a second before I go here and see where we're at. This was number 15 and 16. So this is number 17. And this is number 18. Okay, and those will all be in your notes. You'll have them for your cheat sheets for the test. Chapter 4.